Hi, I'm Raphael Heath, the Head of Geography at the Royal High School, Bath, and I want to talk through some of the ideas for map data analysis in ArcGIS Online in this tutorial and show you how it might be useful in your geography teaching. So I've already got a map open. I've logged into my account. You need to be a subscriber to ArcGIS Online to do this. If you want to find out more about that, just go to www.arcgis.com and find out. But anyway, this is for people who've already got an account and are familiar with it. So I've opened a brand new map, and I'm going to talk through a little bit about how to bring in some data here and conduct analysis on it. So I'm going to add some data that I've already got. So this isn't a tutorial for explaining how to create data or format or anything like that, so I'm assuming people already know about that from other tutorials. So I'm going to add some data. I'm going to start off by adding some police data, some crime data that I've already uploaded onto here from the police crime data website. You can download data for free there. So I've got a layer here called Bath Crime Data October 2013 that I've already made. And we'll bring in some data. All these dots here are for recorded crimes in Bath in October 2013 that you can get hold of. It comes as a spreadsheet, and then you just bring it into ArcGIS Online by creating a feature service. Anyway, another tutorial to explain that, but this is just assume you've got some data that you brought in, which might be your fieldwork data or some secondary data. So here you can see this data's particular dot is antisocial behaviour for that particular dot. That's the crime that was recorded there during October 13. Lots of different types of crimes, so I might just change the symbols here to show that a little bit. So I might use colour and pick the field to be crime type, colour, unique symbols. Sorry, I have to use unique symbols. I have to think about that for a sec. I haven't done this for a while. Crime type. Yes, I can't pick a colour or size here because, well, not for the crime type, because the crime type's a word. It's not a number, and so it wouldn't make sense. So I have to pick a unique symbol, and I've got different colours here. Pick different colour palettes for it. Apply, and gives me a bit of a warning message. But anyway, these now have different colour dots for different crimes. There's so many different types of crimes that it's not a brilliant system. I could spend longer on clicking on a particular crime type and colouring it in a particular way. So I could pick, I don't know, drugs here, and let's pick something really extreme just so you can see where they are. Let's have a look if they come out alright. Okay, I need to make them a bit bigger. Click the apply button. So that's a bit extreme, but you can see the principle. I can change the colour of any one just to really highlight them and bring them out. So there you go, there's drug crime pattern across Bath in October 2013. So anyway, you can play around with that to make it look nicer, but I'll just show you the principles here. Another useful tool here is the filter tool. So if I go under the little menu for that particular layer, Bath crime data, I can go down to this time filter towards the bottom of the list, and I can set a filter for this layer. So I might say, right, the crime type. So let's have a look. Crime type, and I could say something like yes, that's fine, and I might put drugs, which I don't know, let's say contains, just to be safe, because it might have several other words in it. I can't remember quite what they said, drug or drugs. So if I say apply filter now, there we go, that only shows the drug crimes, and the same principle could be used. You can create more complex filters with showing several things or many things. If I go to edit the filter, I could add another expression, so I could have contains drugs and contains antisocial behaviour or something like that, and bring out again a filter of just some of the crimes I want to look at. And I can also remove the filter here, so under edit you can edit them, under view you can remove the filter, and all the data comes back. Okay, so that's a quite useful little tool. The other thing I want to do is perform some analysis here. So if I go under the little sub-menu here and perform analysis, which is 3/4 of the way or so down, at the moment the dots are hard to see as a pattern, and you can do some useful tools here to summarize the data and the patterns within the data. The main one for this at this point is probably this Hotspots analysis tool. So I'll show you how that works. If I click on Hotspots here, it says Analyze Bath Crime Data. That's the only layer in my map, but make sure if you've got many layers that you pick the right one to find statistically significant hotspots. You can choose analysis field. In this case I've got nothing logical to have an analysis field, so just really looking at where the dots are essentially here, rather than data within the dots like crime severity or something else. Options here. Now you don't have to set the options, but you can set a boundary within the options here for where the data you want it to look with for the data within, and that's quite useful sometimes. So you actually just draw the boundary. I'm going to click on this little boundary tool, and it just lets me click around the Bath region to define the area I'm interested in looking at. It's quite useful, particularly if there's lots of areas where you're not interested in looking at, or you just want to look at a small part of Bath or something like that. So I'm not really thinking very much about my boundary, but that's the principle of it. So let's say I'm interested in analysing the hotspots in that area. And then it gives me a name that it's already pre-chosen, which is fine, but because this is just a test, I'm going to call it Test Bath Crime October 13 Hotspots. Okay, hopefully I haven't made a layer called that before, otherwise it will cause a conflict, and I'm going to save it in my folder called Test. You may or may not have made folders in your contents, depending how you organise your maps. So I'm just going to put it in my test folder, and I'm going to use current map extents. That's an option so that in this case if I zoomed in further it would still do all the boundary. And let's show credits. Credits is quite useful just to double check on this, how much they're going to charge you out of your account for this. So it's 890 dots here, and it's going to charge me 0.89 of a credit, not even one credit to do this task. So it's not, that's fine. I've got over 1,000 credits, and I click the button Run Analysis. Now you should see a whirring symbol if it's working here, and no error message has come up yet, and that means it's trying to do the processing for me in the servers in the cloud somewhere, and hopefully it will produce a successful result of creating a hotspot layer. Sometimes these go wrong. It's worth just trying it through again in case there's an error at their end rather than your end in producing the hotspot result. What I'm hoping here is that it will create a nice colour shaded map showing me the clustering of this particular distribution of data. So these tasks take different amounts of time. Normally it takes something between 10 seconds, half a minute, but sometimes they take longer. Depends a little bit on, I suppose, how much the server is being used and how much you're asking it to do. Anyway, so this has now produced the map successfully, as I say. If it doesn't do it, then it's worth giving it a second shot. Sometimes there are errors for no reasons. There are sometimes reasons where there are errors that are legitimate, and you have to kind of get your head around why you might have done a mistake. But if you did what I'm doing this way, it should be fine. Anyway, this has produced a hotspot. If I open it up, it shows me this scale of a statistical definition of hotspots, so statistically significant clusters, which are the red areas, and all the white yellow areas here are not statistically significant as such. Now, hotspots are sort of, trying to understand the maths and science behind it. There's a help guide. If you go under your help menu here, under your name when you're logged in, there's a help menu, and you can try and find out a little bit more about hotspots and find out how they're calculated to understand them fully. But if I go under the layer, it's just created a brand new layer, hotspots, and I go under change symbols here, there are some other options I can pick here. So it's picking colours at the moment, which is fine for the hotspots, and it's using this layer here called GI_bin, which is the hotspot mathematical statistical technique it's using. But there are other ways I can display the data. So for example, I could just do what's called a join count. So for every square that's here, the tiny grid squares that it's created for me, it's called a fishnet tool that does that on, it just counts the number of dots within them. I'm going to pick two colour tones just to emphasize this more, and I'm going to change my colours so that 0 isn't red. I'm going to flip the colours so that 0 is green, and this hopefully will show me the highest counts of crimes, the squares where there's high values of crimes. So that square has 26 points counted within it. and somewhere over here has 0 points counted within a green square. So it's a different way of showing the data just by counting. There's no statistics in there as such, but it's counting them. It's quite nice. You can also do it another way. Here you've got a z-score, GI z-score, which shows the z-score, or standard deviation essentially, of how many points there are in that square compared to the average, the standard deviation from the average. And if I click apply there, you see again it produces me a slightly different feel and flavour to the map. And this is the z-score scale here, so I've got -2 standard deviations as a low z-score, and I've got up to here 14 to 20 as a high z-score here, which means that there is a very high clustering of crimes here above the average for this data set. So again, that's a very different produced map, and in some ways visually much more pleasing than the statistical map of statistical significance there. But you can play around with that, and you've got some controls over different ways to show different maps. But it's a really powerful tool just to display clustering of data, even if you're just counting the points, and you want some way of kind of doing that effectively, and creating a grid like this is quite a quick way of doing that. And notice the my boundary, so it's kind of made this area up to my boundary. If I didn't do my boundary, it would actually produce a slightly less pleasing result with kind of scattered squares and areas which are completely blank in, whereas here it fills out everywhere, even the areas with no data. So in that sense it produces quite an effective map, but you can play around with or without boundary and see what effect it creates. Now I'm just going to get rid of that layer, then the drawn boundary here, and back to my normal crime data here, and I'll just show you one other thing you can do. So I'm going to add another layer because I'm interested in looking at relationships between two layers. So I'm going to search for layers again, and this time I'm going to type in the word pub, or pubs, let's see, and here we go. I've got a layer called pubs in Bath which I've added in. This is again something I've just added in before, so you'd have to sort of sort out this and bring data in as you wish. But basically what I wanted to do is, I'll just get rid of the crime data. These are my pubs in Bath, so if I click on one of them, it tells me this name is called the Dark Horse, it's in Northampton Street, and that's it, the postcode. And I use the postcodes just to create this layer. So I've got a scattering of pubs in Bath, and perhaps what one could do, and you might be able to think of better ideas than this, but the idea for this is that I can bring in data on something like pubs and relate it to the crimes and see whether which pub has the most crimes near it, let's say. That's the sort of theory behind this particular kind of concept exercise. It will illustrate the analysis tool anyway. So if I've got the two layers on here, I've got all the crimes and all the pubs. It's not very easy to see clearly what's going on. It's all a bit of a jumble. Obviously I can change the symbol for pubs to make them more visual, but I won't do that for the moment. But I am going to pick the pubs in Bath layer. I'm going to go down here to perform analysis again, and this time before I was doing data enrichment, again theoretically I could do that on the pubs layer, but I'm going to pick some of the other options here. There are a couple of different ways of doing this. You could play around with the find nearest, which is like a nearest neighbour kind of analysis thing, and produces lines, purple lines from your crimes towards the pub. So I can say which crimes are nearest my pub. You can play around with that. I can create buffers and drive times from each of my pubs should I wish to do that. That's quite a nice thing to do, but not really relevant to this task. I can sort of overlay and merge layers, probably not useful for this task either, but there are uses for that in other particular scenarios. There's some new ones here that just arrived in the last week about finding locations, which I'm going to play around with soon and find out just how useful they are. Some of them do similar things to what I'm going to show you, but in different ways. But I'm going to use this one, Summarise Nearby. Summarise Within is fine if you've got shapes. So if I've got, let's say, different wards in Bath and I want to count the crimes in each ward, but Summarise Nearby is where I've got point data, like these pubs. So I'm going to say Summarise Nearby here, and it says find out what is nearby pubs in Bath. So pretty logical, that's what I want it to do. And it says choose layer to summarise. So here I have to choose the layer. Now it's picked hotspots because it's the first one on the list. That wouldn't really make much sense, and the drawn boundaries makes no sense. So I want it to pick the Bath crime data, October 2013. So I pick that one now to my list because I want to find crimes that are near my pubs. And I can pick a drive distance if I want to do that, or drive time, but a line distance alternatively, and I can control the distance. So let's say I'm going to say, well, crimes that might be associated possibly with a pub or occurring in clusters near a pub, I really want to look at quite close by, so only in metres, not kilometres. It won't show me much. I can go right down to the smallest intervals. Let's say I'm going to pick 50 meters. Let's try 50 meters. So 50 crimes that occur within 50 meters of pub. Possibly there's some link between the crimes that are occurring and the pub. Of course, I could have filtered the data, as I showed you earlier, for the crimes, so it's not all of them, and just some crimes like antisocial behaviour that might, or drugs that might be close to the pubs. But we'll leave it at that for the moment. It says add statistics, so I can actually do things like ask it to create a layer, some data on the layer, which is, for example, summarise each crime by type within the 50 meters. But I'll leave that for the moment, just to keep it simple. And choose filter group by, yes, so again, I could choose it to group data by crime type, let's say, in that analysis. But I'm going to leave that for the moment, and then I'm just going to give it a name. So sensible name is logical for the task you're doing it. And this is just a test for me, so I'm going to call it test, so I know to delete them later and clutter my contents. Test bath pubs 50 meter crimes October 2013 test. Again, now don't think I've called in layer that before, and I've save it in the folder that you want, so I'm going to put it in my test folder so that it doesn't clutter everything else. You've got the same thing about use current map extent or not. You notice that there are some pubs outside my current map extent, one up here. So if I use current map extent, it won't analyse that one, and if I do use current map extent, it will only analyse these ones here. If I untick it, it will do all my pubs. If I just demonstrate that, if I show credits now, see how much it's going to charge me in terms of use of credits that are on my account. It says they are 824 records that are included here within the 50 meters of pubs of Bath. So that's going to cost me 0.82 of a credit, not very much. Let's just see what happens if I don't use current map extent. Show credits, should have a little bit more I think in yet. 1,283 records now, because there are a few more pubs, a few more records, and it's going to cost me 1.2 credits. Again, not very much. So I'll just use current map extent just to show the difference it has and run analysis. This is where I might keep my fingers crossed and hope that their servers are all working and fine, and it does its analysis here, it's whirling through. And what I'm hoping it's going to create is some circles around all my pub dots, which should be 50 meters in distance. It's a whole load of circles. Some of them will be quite clustered around this middle area and quite cluttered. And it will have data for each of these 50 meter circles. At first they'll just be plain coloured. We'll have data for each of the 50 meters. It will have counted all the crimes that lie or rest within the 50 meters. And you know, you can think of loads of ways that you might want to use analysis tools like this for different applications, but this is just one sort of scenario where you can see that that principle played out. So here we go. Let's get rid of some of the other data so it's not so confusing. Okay, so now what I've got is this new layer it's created. It's the data of the Bath pubs. I just zoom out and have all the pubs there. Again, you'll notice, just to show you, that there's a pub there that hasn't got the analysis done on it, the Hare and Hounds, because I didn't ask it to. It was not within the map extent. So those are the difference of using the map extent ones. If I zoom in, it becomes a little bit clearer what's going on here. So basically, it's got a circle. The circle represents, the outside yellow circle represents the 50 meters around that pub, buffer distance, 50 meters around this particular pub called the New Inn. And if I click on, let's have a look. For distance. Oh yeah, okay, and if I click on the other dot, oh yeah, I've got the pubs in the actual pub layer. I've got two layers open here, it's confusing me. Get rid of that one. Okay, so, oh yeah, sorry, that's what I was looking for. Staring me in the face. And that's the thing it's done. It's done this calculation, count of points, and the size of these brownish circles in there represent the count of points. So the bigger the circle there, so that one there represents as 34 crimes that have occurred within 50 meters of the Garrick's Head pub, whereas this pub over here, quite close to it further down the road, called the New Inn, has that's why I didn't understand it before. I think it's had no crimes. This tiny dot has no crimes within it. I'll just go to change symbols. I'll see if I can make it any clearer. the little one dot is the other there, so that's why there is a little dot, but it is actually 0. So it's doing a thing on size. Let's see what happens if I do it on colour. Apply. So there we have a colour scheme system. The zeros have disappeared now, and I can see this was my 34 crimes in the Garrick's Head. It's got a scale here that's based that on, and I've got other pubs here where I've only got 2 crimes in a lighter colour. So you see I've created completely new and original data from 2 different layers. I had the pubs layer, I had the crimes layer. I've now asked it to do these buffer circles of 50 metres. I could have done any sort of size, maybe 100 metres or 10 metres, and it's counted the crimes within them, creating a brand new layer map there. Completely new original data, quite interesting and fun for kids to work with and play with that for some particular purpose, all kinds of applications I'm sure you can think of potentially for something like that, and it introduces you to the analysis layers there. So just to show that, that's my hotspot layer, that's my test layer. Those are both produced completely originally from my dots from bath pubs and my dots from crime data. And that gives you an insight into the analysis layers, and if I just show you again perform analysis, you've got all kinds of things you can play around with. Hopefully this introduction gives you a feel to the kinds of things you can do in them. I've got another tutorial that mentions enriched layers, so it's worth having a look at that one. Hotspots I used today, proximities are worth playing with, so all kinds of stuff that hopefully you can use really usefully in your geography lessons to create interesting map analysis and share those maps as well online so people can see what you're doing. If you join my GDST group, then you can share the maps via them. I'd love to see what you're doing as well. Hopefully that's useful. My name's Raphael Heath, Head Geography, Royal High School Bath, part of GDST. And if you want to contact me, got any questions, email me at r.heath@rhsb.gdst.net.